You're listening to ThunderQuack Podcast Network.
I'm Marie-Claire Gould, and Lore Olympus is my perfect 10.
Hello and welcome back to Perfect 10. This is a surprise episode. This is a special episode. You guys probably weren't expecting this one. I did kind of talk about it on the last one, but you maybe weren't expecting it quite so soon. We did just put out an episode last week, and I know when I started doing this, I said that this show would be every 4 weeks. But what I knew was going to happen eventually has already happened, and that is that I'm having so much fun doing this show, and I people have things that they want to come on the show and talk about, or just people who just want to come do have some podcast fun, and so here we are already with an episode in between episodes. I have the next 3 months scheduled out with guests. I'm way ahead of the game. I'm so proud of myself. And then I messaged our guest for this episode and said, "Hey, whenever you want to come on," and she was gracious enough to be like, I got time next month. Let's do it." And I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna figure this out. We're gonna fit this in." So allow me to introduce one of my favorite podcasters, certainly my favorite Star Wars podcaster, Marie-Claire Gould from What the Force. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to Perfect 10 and to talking about something other than Star Wars.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah, this
Yeah.
is awesome. One of my favorite things. I'm wearing my Lore Olympus shirt just for this occasion.
Yeah. So Lore Olympus, man, this is something that I have seen you and several others on Twitter talk about on a regular basis. And I was always kind of like, yeah, that's a cool idea. I like it. The art's good. I dig it. And then a few weeks back, somebody posted like a Sailor Moon transformation sort of animation of Persephone transforming into sort of her underworld goddess look. And I was like, I loved it so much. I was like, okay, that's it. I got to start reading this. And I downloaded the apps and everything, and I got going on it. And at the same time, we were talking about you coming on the podcast, and so it just like synced up, and I was like, normally what I do is I ask the person coming out, like the guest coming on, "Hey, what do you want to talk about?" But with this one, I knew how much you love Lore Olympus, and I was enjoying it so much that I was like, "Hey, when do you want to come do this?" And you were like, "Let's do it soon." I was like,
Yeah,
"Yes, okay."
yeah.
Yeah.
There are many things that I could probably do an episode
Oh, for
on,
sure.
but
Yeah.
this one is something I've actually never talked about on any of my own shows, even though I created What the Fiction to cover it. And I haven't covered it yet because I'm
Yeah.
waiting for word on when the animated show, which is going to be done by Jim Henson Animation, is going to be coming out. And it's going to be on
Oh, wow.
Netflix. Yeah. So I was waiting for that so then I could do like
Yeah.
a lead up for it and talk more in depth about the themes and about the story itself as well as the
Hmm.
animation. Just to give it a good lead up and really to the thing about podcasts like ours that we run is that we enhance fandom and we build fandom by existing. We do
Hmm.
a huge favor to properties like
Yeah.
Star Wars by continuing the conversation once the show is done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to give Laura Olympus a little chunk of more fandom. Not that it needs it from me, but I want to encourage more people to fall in love with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you definitely encouraged me to. I think your influence is probably the biggest influence for why I started reading it. So yeah, and
I'm quite known for my good taste.
I agree. I was actually thinking about that. And any time that you recommend anything, it's like sometimes it's like, but I don't have time. I don't have time to get into that because I know that if you are recommending it, especially if you and Ty both recommend it, like that's one of those things where I know like I'm in trouble. Like I can't get into this K drama or whatever, like because I know that if I do, it'll just swallow me whole. Because you guys are always like just right on the edge of that, like the bleeding edge of that cool stuff. So, but this was one where I was like, okay, this is easy. Like it's just it not just a, but like it's a web comic. Like I can just read it on my phone, sort of
Mhm.
as I go. It's on Webtoon and stuff. Um, it's fine. And then I did get consumed by it, and I've like put off other things like watching Lord of the Rings, or we only watched 3 episodes of Cobra Kai last night because I was like, I gotta keep reading this. It's like I gotta cut this off here because I gotta keep reading Lore Olympus for tomorrow. um I So
Yeah.
yeah, it has really taken over. But why don't you, before we get too far into it, give us the primer. What is Lore Olympus?
So Laura Olympus is, I guess she considered it herself, Rachel Smythe, who's the creator of Laura Olympus, an adaptation of primarily the Hades and Persephone myth. But it really covers sort of the overarching politics and stories of the gods from this very unique uh, done again perspective, where Rachel herself, and she said this in interviews, which is really great. She asked herself, well, that's a weird thing when she would be reading mythology because
Hmm.
Rachel primarily is just a myth nerd. She would say, well, that's kind of a weird, interesting thing. Like, why did the gods do that? Or what's the story there? And really just was super fascinated with the blanks. And Persephone herself as a character in mythology doesn't have a lot actually said about her. There's a lot about Demeter, there's a lot about Hades, there's a lot about Zeus obviously and all of his torrid love affairs, etc. But Persephone herself is a character that is not deeply explored in source material, and also very rarely explored in modern day adaptations or iterations of the myth. She is archetypical in so many ways and very appealing. Their love story, because it is a love story in this version, their love story is really enticing because they are archetypically this opposites attract full sort of romance.
Mhm.
And uh, Rachel herself just was really, really fascinated by that and wanted to answer questions that kept on popping into her head about the myths themselves, which are weird. Like we look at them from our perspective, but she also wanted to give it sort of a context by which the mythology could be real, also handle some modern day themes and situations that are things that people do struggle with, as well as, using her gorgeous art style and eye for beauty. She tells it in such an enhanced and gorgeous way with the webtoon itself, the comic.
Mhm.
It's just, you know, the adaptation is really like a weird word because, you can go and watch a Hollywood movie about the Greek gods and be like, well, I guess that's an adaptation because it's taking the text and putting it into a different format, right? It's not the text being read in its source form, but she has really taken it and iterated it to be its own universe in a way, but
Mhm.
is entirely faithful to, I guess, the feelings and what I would consider to be the mythic truth of the original mythology. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is such an interesting sort of hybrid of the two things, right? It almost at times feels like fan fiction, right? But it's fan fiction for for something it's not a franchise, right? It's
Yeah.
myth. So it doesn't belong to anybody, right? But it is very much its own universe, like you said. Like it beyond just the gods and demigods and nymphs and all of that sort of thing. Like
Mhm.
it creates its own set of rules of like the mortal realm is one thing and Olympus is another thing and the underworld is another thing.
Mhm.
And it's so fantastic at the world building without ever stopping to sort of gorge
Explain?
on its own
Yeah.
nonsense,
It
which
just sort
which
of
yeah,
is.
yeah,
Which is good.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you only ever need to know it does what I think George Lucas was so good at in the original trilogy. It only ever explains what we need to know for the story. Like,
Yeah.
and that is it, right? We don't need to take a break and explain a million things about why this world is the way that it is. And like what the rules are. And one aspect of it that I absolutely love is Persephone exemplifies this better than any other character, but so many of the characters, they visually change based on their emotional state, and it has
Mhm.
to do with their origin and their powers and all of that sort of thing. And I love it because it's just like it keeps things fresh visually, but it just gives us these cues as readers to what's going on with that character. And so when we see, even when we're with other characters and we see flowers start to pop up and stuff, we know that something is happening with Persephone somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And it just, yeah, like there's just little things like that like it never stops, it never explains that, she never like has an exposition dump where she tells everybody about how when she gets flustered her hair grows, right? Like it's never it just from the get-go, it's just something that happens. And like everybody is just sort of like, nobody makes a big deal about it really. Like it's not even noteworthy to some characters, and we just kind of keep going.
It's
So
the
yeah, yeah,
it's the amazing rule of show don't tell,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and it lives by that. It also does an amazing job of feeling modern,
Hmm.
but also being very self-aware that it's not modern. It's it's telling something else, right? It's telling this alternative reality world that doesn't actually exist. Um, so there is modern problems that help us with our sort of plug into our modern sensibilities about social media. Like instead of Facebook, they have the Facebook.
Hmm.
So it's like the Fates book. They have paparazzi. They have other problems that are kind of you know brought up throughout the course of the story because it's high drama,
Hmm.
uh, much like the original mythology. High drama, like Zeus having affairs with anything that will walk, running all over the place, etc. That's all in there, and that would be like you think like Sex in the City or something like that.
Hmm.
That's out there, or some sort of like soap opera, and it plays that as just like that is the story and these are these people and the gods themselves. um if you are a god or a goddess, you have a certain amount of just power within you, and all of the other immortals like the nymphs and the other creatures that happen to exist kind of immortally in this world that of lore Olympus, they you know kind of forget because it's become this civilized place since the dawn of time. And that plays into the myths too. Like you think about a character like Minth, who is, or Minthy, yeah, um, who is just this kind of one-off line in the actual mythology. She's mentioned as kind of like this, I guess, love rival to Persephone for Hades, uh, she gets, her own kind of build up and story to understand what sort of nymph would dare be a challenger to a goddess.
Mhm.
And it makes it like uh, rich and full, and the characters themselves are all sort of messy in different ways, but also lovable and wonderful. And so like I could totally see the characters themselves being quite polarizing for the most part to some people. Like every single character
Mhm.
is polarizing, but yet also really enticing because they feel like whole individuals. They feel
Mhm.
like whole people in the comic. With that, you end up getting just better storytelling for characters that in the original mythology or even in many, many adaptations don't get a fair shake, like Hera, right?
Mhm.
Hera, most famously known for, in so many ways, torturing Heracles uh, because he was the product of an affair with Zeus. And so, you know, she's always cast as this very vengeful and jealous woman or jealous goddess. But,
Mhm.
we get this version of her in the comic where she's loving, considerate, thoughtful, justified, all
Yeah.
of those things. And like, not that everything else about the story itself didn't sell me on it, but Hera herself being just a absolutely an amazing character, and that's just, like, all of the women characters especially are just exceptional.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I there's sort of an aspect of it. I love how it can flip back and forth between being very sort of silly and nonsensical, and then on a dime it'll get into like very very heavy and deep storytelling,
Mhm,
and sort of like these really mature themes, and it balances those two things and feels like it's always kind of it's tonally inconsistent in that way, but it's consistently inconsistent, right? Like we kind of, you even from the way that it's drawn and everything, kind of know which vibe we're in right now.
yep,
And so sometimes Zeus and Hera's back and forth is banter, and then other times it's violent and it's a fight, and then other
mhm,
times it's like it's very like dramatic, and there's a lot of pain and hurt going on, and
mhm,
it's just, I think it is probably the greatest strength of it, from my perspective, is in the way that it is able to balance all three of those things, and take these characters that we know from a variety of sources, right? I
yeah,
mean, the majority of my Greek mythology knowledge started in the 90s with I hate to say it because he's turned into a real terrible human being now. Actually, it's kind of fitting because he made Hercules seem like such a nice guy in his series, Kevin Sorbo. But
oh.
it turns out that in real life, he's a lot more like Heracles than he was Hercules, because Hercules, I always like to think, is kind of like the almost like that Disneyfication of that character. But in the actual myth, Heracles is not a great guy. He's a hero, which didn't mean good person. It just meant that he did these amazing tasks, these Herculean tasks. Right? We have so much
Yeah,
of our nomenclature that's built around it. So like that informs so much of my perspective on this stuff. But then this takes sort of that source stuff and just uh like you're saying, like a character like Minthy, and just like spins that out, and she becomes this amazing complex character. And there's a turn at one point. I don't want I want to like avoid some of the bigger spoilers,
mhm,
um so that people can enjoy it, but she has a bit of a turn at one point, um and and it really really takes it to a very like vital, I think, and interesting place to take a story in this time period, or like in this day and age, in
Mm-hmm.
2022, the sort of conversations that I think are very worthwhile to have. And then a couple chapters later, you're back to it being silly and stuff. I
I think
but yeah,
I think
it
that's really important actually, because if there isn't sort of a flow to a story
mhm,
where it's all dark. It's all dark all the time.
yeah,
There's no fun. There's no joy. It's just, it just ends up being uh, depressing,
yeah,
right? Or just constantly dark. And maybe you can
yeah,
handle a horror movie for 2 hours, or some sort of drama that ends up just being very realistic and
yeah,
nihilistic in its telling. But that's not this story. This story is mythic in nature, and thus there's going to be ups and there's going to be downs. The trials will pass, they'll get better. And fundamentally, when you're dealing with a story that is focusing on archetypical opposites like Hades and Persephone, the point is to find the midpoint between them. How do
mhm,
two things that seem like they shouldn't belong together, right? The goddess of spring and the god of the underworld, i.e., the ruler of the dead after they have died, get to be married, right? Like, that's
mhm,
like, how does that make sense? And why does it feel so satisfying that we know that that's where they end up?
yeah,
That's the point. It's the why of how they get there, and how, you know, we as humans like to make sense of the senseless and to bridge the unbridgeable. We like to have things understood as to why the two polar opposite magnets, or magnets that don't want to come together, how do they end up coming together?
yeah.
And opposites themselves, and the way that we see those two things resolve is really satisfying storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I think one of the keys with the dynamic between Hades and Persephone, it's very similar to Kylo Ren and Rey, right?
Mhm.
Where it's each one of them, Persephone brings out the light in Hades, and sort of the things that he feels like he's lost over time, and then Hades brings out the darkness in Persephone and the things that she feels like she's not allowed to have, that she's not allowed to feel.
Mhm.
um and so like that's where, and I think like that's when the romantic aspect of it, where you want to see them come together, is that you do see them bring out these aspects in one another. And like you want Persephone in the story, like you want her to find her power, right? Like you want
Mhm.
her to reach into that darkness and smite somebody every once in a while, because there's a lot of people who do her wrong over the course of it, that you really like you're that very human need for revenge is just like, you feel it and you're like just do it, like just do it, and you can see it bubbling up in her. But at the same time, like you also don't want her to lose who she is, right? Like there's
Mhm.
there's just this push and pull, this tension with both of those characters, that runs throughout it, that just compels you to read the next chapter and the next chapter. I don't know what I'm gonna do when I catch up, because I'll probably catch up in the next week or so, and
And you'll
and
be
I'll get to
paying
the
for fast passes. That's what you'll do.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like I'm already looking at that and going like, I know, like they've got me 100%. I ordered volume 1, 2, and 3. Three's not even out for a few more weeks,
Couple of weeks,
but
yeah.
I have all three of them ordered from my comic shop, and I'm just waiting. The hardcovers, I had made sure, I was like, I don't want the soft covers. I need the hardcovers. These are to go on my shelf to be like, I love this, and this goes next to these other things that I love. Um, because I'll read it on my phone. but
Yeah, no, I mean,
but the
on the
artifacts
phone,
are so important.
yeah, on the phone is great because of the format of how Webtoon
Yeah,
works. She's played into sort of the medium really
yeah.
well with how the art works. So it's completely perfect on Webtoon. I reread in my physical copies,
Mhm.
and yeah, they're great. She also includes a couple of sort of cut scenes that she ended up adding in there. So
Ooh,
those are worth it to read themselves. They're
okay.
really great.
So now I'm gonna have to read through them. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm also
and then she has
excited
a little
for
explanation on them too,
cool.
which is great.
I'm excited. I'm excited to get the physical ones because I know that my wife, Crystal, she wouldn't sit and read these things on her phone. It's just not. She's not like a digital native in the way that people like you and I are. But she loves a book. She loves a physical book, and I just got
Mhm.
her to read Love Hypothesis, and
Oh, good.
she couldn't put it down. We were at the mall yesterday, and she was like, "I just got to go to the bookstore real quick and get something," and I was like, "I wonder what she's going to get." And she picked up the new Ali Hazelwood.
Oh, yeah.
Let's Love on the Brain is the new one, I
Love
think.
on the Brain,
Yeah,
yeah.
so she comes out with that and a reading light so that she can stay up late and read it after I go to sleep. But I said to her, I was like, when you're done, and when I get Lore Olympus, I think that you should read it because I think that you're really gonna like it. And so I'm really excited for her to dig into it because I think that
I haven't
she'll
met a person that
enjoy
has
it.
picked it up and hasn't loved it, so
Yeah.
that's good. I mean, like, you think about it, it's been out since 2018,
Hmm.
and I think that at last count, it has 1.1 billion views and over 1,000,000 subscribers on Webtoon. Oh, 6,000,000
That's incredible.
subscribers. Yeah,
That's
six
incredible.
million subscribers.
I feel like it's because I like within our circle I see people talking about it, but sort of outside of that I don't really hear anybody talking about it. So I'm going like, well, this will be great to get it wider to a bigger audience, but I it doesn't this Lore Olympus does not need my help with my 100 listeners on this podcast, you know.
I
But I am hoping that a few people who maybe wouldn't have come across it are gonna hear us talk about it and dig into it.
Yeah. I think, again, what I said about, like, me wanting to cover this in
Hmm.
when the TV show comes out is that it deserves its own fandom. And if I'm just another talking voice that's talking glowingly about it,
Hmm.
that's that's all that I can, I'll contribute that because it
Yeah.
deserves that. It deserves to have the online conversations about the story. And with Webtoon, you read the story, maybe it takes you 10 minutes for a comic that's particularly long, or sometimes it could take you less because there's less actual reading involved in it. Um, you're kind of in and out, right? Whereas television shows, when it's going to be this animated show, there's going to be conversations about it. And it absolutely deserves to have the space it needs to take up on the internet.
Hmm.
So that's why I want to cover it.
Yeah, absolutely. I get that actually that's a really great place for us to sort of segue into the question of like why this is your perfect 10, right? Like
Okay.
specifically for you, what what is the connection that you have personally that makes this something that just I resonates, right? I
Yeah. Yeah. It okay. So it doesn't even need the artwork that it has, and the artwork is still amazing.
Mhm,
I would still read this because of the story and because of how well it takes on the themes it takes on. Um, Specifically, like the tropes it covers, the way it artfully incorporates the mythology and makes it new and feel like you're exploring it again for the first time. Yeah, I think it's perfect in its inception, and what it's done for introducing these concepts to people, especially. I don't know if you know this, listeners, but I am a big mythology nerd. And so when something like this comes along and it's done in such a wonderful way, I'm going to jump onto it. I went to London many years ago and actually got to see the London presentation of the musical Mythic, which is a story of Hades and Persephone as a musical. I highly recommend it. It's really, really great if you ever get to see it. It's only been presented twice, London and then one time in Ontario, Canada. Um, but the story itself, what is really, really appealing about this and the myth of Hades and Persephone, if it's taken with a more agency focused view of Persephone, is when you have these opposites, like a young and uh very naive at the start goddess who is in a growth period. She's trying to grow and become something bigger. She's trying to discover who she truly is and what she's all about. And she really hasn't been given the opportunity to do that with, you know, her background and where she's from, which of course, Demeter, the goddess of the earth. Demeter actually means mysterious mother. So she is like, Mother Earth. She is the goddess of growth, and Persephone is her daughter, who she originally goes by Kore, which is Kore, which translates loosely to daughter or girl. She is the daughter of the earth. That is her name. And why does she, at some point in both mythological history and in the story of Lore Olympus, suddenly get a new name of Persephone, which in the comic, although in mythology it doesn't, it's always associated with this sort of meaning, but they don't really know the etymology of where it came from. Persephone, bringer of death. She is the death bringer. So like, how do you go from kind of being just girl to goddess of death
Mhm.
with before even uh really being, caught up in underworld's business? uh and so there's obviously a power deep inside of Persephone that is bubbling under the surface. She struggles to manage her abilities to start. She's very young, and so doesn't have a lot of experience with the world, with dealing with different things, doesn't have a lot of experience with other people, doesn't really know, that her own feelings on matters are valid. And through kind of a heroine's journey, th- she discovers that her own inner power is valid and is also has been there the whole time, and she can be the mistress of that and thus bring a lot of goodness to both the underworld and the world above. Hades, on the other hand, is old, right? So opposites, right? Young, old. Uh, he himself is one of the oldest Olympians out there. And they actually call him an old man a lot. He's got white hair just to kind of accentuate that. And he's kind of depressed, sad, stuck, um, reliving trauma that is, millennia old. uh, doesn't feel worthy of anything. And through the sort of interactions that they have together and the questioning of newness and transformation, find their own worthiness by looking at each other through each other's eyes. They start to grow and change and transform. And that's actually something that has always appealed to me. I watch a lot of I love vampires. I love genre, which is about sort of Chinese gods, right? Immortals from that perspective. I've always loved mythology from all cultures, especially when you have gods that are immortal, because it's like gods themselves exist and they don't change very often. They're kind of set in their ways. So, what is something that happens that completely changes and transforms a being that has so much power and has lived for eons, but can't seem to it can't seem to change because they don't. Like when you're kind of set in your ways and you're just who you are and you have this power, nothing's going to change you. So what transforms you, and what is that story that really entices you to get a new lease on immortal life? Uh, I also just love like all of the tropes. So the opposites continue. He's very big from an artistic perspective. She's very, very tiny.
Yeah.
Um, they're different colors, right? She's pink, this bright, bright pink, and he's this dark, dark kind of night blue. Um, they're I already mentioned their age difference, but it's also kind of like the discovery of each other. People assume that she's innocent and thus not intelligent,
Hmm.
and people assume that he's monstrous and scary and thus not gentle and kind. And it's like stripping away those layers and also finding out more about who you truly are, so that in the end you can be, or these characters can be, whole and complete people by the end. And that's the entire reason we tell mythologically mythic structured stories, is so that we can get the metaphorical literally out in the story.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's I get caught up in it. You go like that for a while, and I'm just listening.
Sorry.
No, it's fantastic. Because I just become a podcast listener again to my own podcast. It's good. No, one of the things that you made me think of there, it's very early on in the series, and it's one of the smartest things I think that she did in writing this, is that we discover so early that Hades is a dog lover,
Mhm.
which is obviously born of the fact that Cerberus is the guardian of the underworld, right? He guards the
Yeah.
gates of the underworld, and so it's this thing of like, first we're introduced to Cerberus, who is monstrous at first, but then it turns out Persephone brings out in Cerberus immediately the puppy, right?
Yeah.
Which is just this great reflection. It's this foreshadowing of what is going to happen in their relationship. Like, you're instantly like, yep, this is where this is going to go. But then we find out that Hades actually has like 9 dogs, not just
Yeah.
Cerberus. That he's and they all have cute names, and there's and he's got like
He's a dog dad. Yeah.
yeah, they have personalities or whatever. When we see the only post so far, as far as I've read in the series so far, the only post on Facebook that he's made is a post of one of his dogs dressed in a little outfit, and it's just like, it's stupid stuff like that, that it's like, it's funny, it makes you giggle when you find out, but actually it does this amazing thing where it instantly humanizes Hades, who we're used to seeing as like monstrous and evil, and like, James Woods in the Disney Hercules stuff, right? And it's like, oh, he's the
Yeah.
bad guy, right? And it's like, oh, he's not a bad guy at all. As a matter of fact, he's just like, he's duty bound to his job, and his job is not a job that anybody wants to have, right? Like, and so actually he's tragic in that sense, and he feels unloved, and so he surrounds himself with these creatures that give unconditional love, right? And he gives unconditional love back to them, and it instantly lets us know that actually he's good underneath whatever else he might do. He's actually like because that's there's the saying, it's like if you want to know how, like, if a person is a good person, pay attention to how they treat animals, right?
Yeah.
um and it's exactly that, where like it shows us right away. And it also shows us that Persephone doesn't judge based on exterior, right? She doesn't judge based on things that are on the surface. Like us, the as the reader, recognizing this in Hades instantly, she also recognizes this, which
Yeah.
puts us in her shoes. It makes us relate to her. Like, it's just this one little aspect that, if it wasn't in the story, would those characters work as well as they do? And that's just one of like a good like couple dozen things, as we're introduced to new characters and new aspects of the world are brought in, that like it's just every time it just strengthens all of these ideas that we have about people. And a new character will show up like Ares, and it'll
Hmm.
totally turn your perception of Persephone on its head, right? Now all of a sudden, like,
Yeah.
now there's all this extra backstory. um and when we find out that, like, that her and Hermes have a backstory as well, and it's like,
Yeah.
I
She's way
and
more
find
complex than
yeah.
like it seems on surface, where everybody kind of dismisses her because
Yeah.
she's young, she's small, she's seems innocent, but she's got all of these things that she has going for her, which is fundamentally her connection. She builds connections with others very, very
Hmm.
easily. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, it's just it's I mean, like, that there are so many aspects of it that like any one of them you could sit down and you could dig into. And that's why, like, I when you say that, when the series gets closer, you're going to start to do those deep dives on what the fiction, it's like, I can't wait, because there are so many things that you could just take this one thing that someone says, and you could probably do, at least 45 minutes of like digging into what does that mean, right? And where does that come from? And I mean, like, we haven't even talked on this episode about Apollo or any of that stuff, which
Mm-hmm.
like is one of those other places, similar, actually even more so than the stuff with Zeus and Hera, that really makes
There's a
this
lot of darkness
story.
in this story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it makes it something more than just romance. It makes it more than just humor. But
It's
it
humanistic.
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
there's a lot
and
of um very difficult things that it tackles,
yeah,
and it does it with love and with consideration and proper tagging of triggering content, which
yeah,
is rare.
yeah, absolutely.
And you can tell that this is written by a woman who
Hmm.
gets that, yeah, these things are um important to talk about and very real for many of the readers that
Hmm.
are reading the comic, but handles it with love and care. In the second season, um Persephone, this is a tiny bit of a spoiler, but not so much, but she actually seeks out going to therapy, which is something that Eros recommends her
Hmm.
do
Yeah.
um early on in the first season. And it's refreshing that it's handled in such a good way. It's
Hmm.
not a weird thing. It's really needed, and it helps her. And when have you ever seen a piece of fiction that has both dealt with the sort of challenge the problem, the violence that a
Hmm.
character might have gone through, and shows a way out of that in a realistic way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll say from the male perspective, um, that I mean, one of the reasons why I think that reading something like Lore Olympus, as I said before, it's like this is vital. These types of stories are vital, I think, in this day and age, and in the cultural conversations that we're having right now. Thing about things like consent and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Is that female perspective? I think men sometimes have a hard time connecting with those stories because they can be, um it can be alienating when it's only the female perspective that's represented in that. and
Mm.
i and i do think that she's so good at also representing the male side in a way that doesn't shy away from the the difficult aspects, and the dark aspects of it, but while
Mm-hmm.
also actually having empathy and presenting those characters in a way where, like, they truly don't see themselves as villains,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I and that that is a very that what it shows me is that she understands the male aspect of it, like the psychological male aspect of it, but isn't
Well, like the character,
isn't
I think.
beholden to defending it like a man would be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
as a man you feel like you want to be like, well, but I'm not like that, right? So
Yeah.
even if you write a character that's like that, you do it in a way that's like apologetic for the
Right.
for the gender, right? Like you're like, oh, there are guys and they will do things, and it's not all of us are that way, but I think because it's written from a female perspective that understands that male psyche really really
Mm-hmm.
well,
Well, I
that
think
it's
that
presented in that way, which makes it, I think, easier to relate to,
we're talking
and
about a
understand.
specific character,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like we know enough about him that knows that
Hmm.
he's never been like, when your ego gets so big,
Yeah,
you feel like you're justified to everything, right?
yeah,
And when you're never told and taught, you know, uh, that violence or taking can't coexist with love of self or love of others.
yeah.
And
I
we see that with Hades, his struggle
Yeah.
with like the violence and um sort of the world hating him for looking so similar to his father Kronos,
Hmm.
and also him not having I don't know, the self-esteem to to have pulled himself away from his own trauma at the start of the story.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's important things to talk about, and doing it with fiction makes it easier as a
Yeah.
lens into self, right? It's just the seeds of your own exploration with your own shadows. If you had a similar situation where you're like, "No, I don't want to pass on the generational trauma I was given," because that's what the Greek, uh Titan Titans, we had Ouranos who was scared of his children and so destroyed them until the Titans overthrew him. And then we had the Titans. We had Kronos, who was scared of his children and so ate them
Yeah,
until Zeus and the rest of them overthrew him and the rest of the Titans. Like there's generational trauma in
yeah.
this mythology. And Hades doesn't want to continue that trauma.
Which is so
And he
fascinating to
does it
write
through
him.
self-hate, right?
Yeah,
Self-hate. He stops himself because he hates himself rather than
yeah.
stopping himself because he loves himself. And that's the growth we see throughout the story. It's
I love the way that we're really like presented with Zeus in his full disgusting splendor. I At a certain point in the story we start hearing more and more about his exploits. And it's at the same time that we hear about like we start to dig into Hades, and he's thinking about, you know, what a potential future with Persephone would be, and he talks about the fact that he's infertile. And so what you just said about like Hades is the one, he doesn't want to continue this generational trauma, but he's also like, well, I don't want to use the wrong terminology because I don't want to make somebody who's infertile sound like they're lesser, because I don't think that that's the case. But like, he's not he that's not his path, right? And
hmm
yet he is best equipped to deal with children, with having children,
Yeah.
in that
Being that
way.
he is a dad dog or a
A
doggy
dog that,
dad, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And yet he doesn't have that opportunity, and then here on the other side of it is his older brother and his nemesis, right?
Yeah.
Which both can be true. I say that from experience. I and who is a philanderer of the highest caliber, right? And has
Yeah.
children all over the mortal realm, demigods
And
and the like,
gods.
and
Yeah.
gods, and it's like just that wanton kind of destructive attitude. And we get these like really close to like that Hades stuff is really close after we get the confrontation between Ares and Hades, and sorry, and Zeus. That is very much like it, that is very much reenacting that generational trauma with
Mhm.
Kronos and like with the Titans, right? Like
Yep.
they're so close together that to me, it's like we talk about this and we discuss this. I didn't think about it as I was reading it earlier today, but now we talk about it and it's like that can't be a mistake. Like that has to have been intentional, or at least subconsciously intentional, in the writing of it. But it is, yeah, it is where like so many of these strengths come out in this story of these archetypes that are used to then add depth to these very real conversations. um and
So
so much of it is about dealing with trauma and healing and being better than, sort of like I think what people want to peg a psychosis as, right? Like
yeah.
people are so quick to go like to pathologize behavior, right?
Yeah.
And when we do that, then we can then make excuses for ourselves once somebody has pathologized us, right? Like once somebody has said like, oh, you know, so and so is that way because of blank, then it's so easy for us to just live inside that and to just get into
Mhm.
that pity
Instead of
cycle.
like, okay, now I'm aware of that. Now what do I
Yeah,
do? Yeah.
then overcome,
So
right?
I'm gonna detour just ever so
Yeah.
briefly, and I'm gonna talk about why, like, why does myth exist? Why does myth exist, Michael?
Oh man, I you'll have such a better answer than I ever could. But I mean, as I understand it, mostly from listening to you and Ty talk about myth, is it's sort of the mirror thing, right? It's to hold it up to ourselves and to have those ways of exploring our own psyche, in safe ways, kind of like we've been talking about. Fiction allows us
Yeah.
to look at ourselves without actually having to look at ourselves.
You're a very
Um,
good student. I
Thank
mean,
you.
like, okay, so there's a long tradition of analyzing myth as to why it exists because it's so pervasive. You know, you look at
Mhm.
Joseph Campbell, you look at every story out there. Like even I was brushing up on my original mythology just so I could like get wrap my head around it. And there's even like a little sub, you know, text in the text that I was reading all about George Lucas and his use of mythopoeia and telling
Mhm.
the archetypical stories again inside of this textbook. It's like, oh, okay, so we're just, you know, we acknowledge that these things come back and they bubble up in our cultures, right? And there was a long tradition of talking about, especially Greek mythology and the older mythologies of the world when the world was younger, and the human race itself, from a cultural perspective, which, the only reason we have culture is to survive, right? Culture is based on shared survival. We as the human race are trying to survive and live together on this blue planet, this blue ball spinning in a sea of stars, trying to just survive, right? That's the only reason culture exists. Religion, politics, social contracts, all of that is all just there to help us coexist together. And so a lot of people throughout history have analyzed myth and considered it to be allegorical, right? So it represents things to help people make sense of their reality. Why does thunder and lightning happen? Well, there's a very powerful god that exists on Mount Olympus that goes and produces those things. Why did somebody die before I thought, hey, they shouldn't die, and then they just one day just died? Well, that was because Thanatos said, oh, or the fates said that was their time, and Thanatos picked them up and brought them to the underworld. Where are they now? Well, they're being taken care of by the god of the underworld. Why does it turn to the rainy season? Because this is a really interesting fact about Greece, that we kind of picture winter, especially those of us that live in Canada, as the time that Hades had Persephone in the underworld. But actually, in Greece, it's the rainy season, and things can still grow in Greece over the winter, but it is considered to be wet winter. So when you think about Demeter missing Persephone when she's in the underworld, she's crying, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
all allegorical. It's trying to explain the world that they lived in and to make sense of what feels like chaos. And in some ways as well, there was an allegorical nature to Persephone being taken away by a husband, right? So, and her mother missing her and feeling like she had no rights to have her back, right? So like these were allegorical explanations that helped people make sense of the fact that, this mother-daughter pair were very close, and suddenly she's married to this guy and she never gets to see her. How do you resolve those feelings, and how do you work through those things? And in that way, why is retelling a myth in a modern sense with a modern sensibility like Lore Olympics actually really, really important? And this ties back to what you were just talking about, Michael.
Are you asking me to answer that question? Oh, I don't know if I
Yes,
can. I don't know if I'm equipped. I need you to tell me.
because the modern things that we face for our survival
Hmm.
are not whether our grains are
Mm,
growing,
yeah.
but whether our psychology is sound.
Ugh. That's that's a eureka moment. Like that's like an epiphany. That's so amazing. Cause yeah, you're absolutely right. And
It's why we need
yeah,
not an adaptation. This is an iteration of
yeah.
mythology. It is making it poignant and beautiful for today
Hmm.
because, you know, underneath this story, I don't know if you've caught this with where you're at with your reading and everything, but there's a constant theme of bringing up that Persephone is a fertility goddess.
Hmm.
What does that mean? Like, what did that mean in Greek times, right? Fertility
Yeah.
was one of the most important things that you could have. In fact, there was, I think, 9 fertility gods in Greek mythology, including Hermes, who represented male fertility. But the idea is it represented everything. The primary one was Aphrodite, who represented, hey, I'm going to have babies, I'm going to
Hmm.
have people to carry on my lineage. I'm going to have people who can help me as I get older. I'm going to have people to, I'm going to have children. Um, but the entire society and culture's survival was entirely dependent on whether spring came and they could grow grain.
Hmm.
In classic art of Persephone, she's often holding a bushel of grain because she is the reason they survive. They have food to eat. It's an agricultural society. What does fertility mean metaphorically, psychologically? It's something different. It's creation. It's creation from nothing. It's it's the ability to get yourself out of problems. It's the ability to do artwork. It's the ability to, try something new. It's growth. And that's what we need. That's the
Yeah. Wow.
secret, and that's the ultimate power. And she keeps on bringing it up. Rachel keeps on bringing it up throughout the
Hmm.
comic. It's
That's
wonderful.
that's so interesting because then Hades being opposite of
Mhm.
that freedom and that creation and that self-expression, Hades the underworld is represented primarily as a business, right?
Yeah, and
And they
capitalism.
and capitalism, and what do they make? They make phones and computers.
Yeah, and soft
These things
drinks.
that
Yeah.
these things that were like were I chained to, like shackled to, right? And
Mhm.
they're and also the source of a lot of the frustration in the story is gossip and social media and all of that sort of thing,
The tools by
and the
which,
gods
yeah, they have
represent
been
a lot
made
of that
by,
stuff. Oh.
yeah.
See, this is why I wanted to do this. This is why I was like, we have to talk about Lore Olympus because I'm getting into it, but I need this part of it. I needed
Yeah.
you to bust it wide open for me. I'm so glad that I've read as much as I have, but I'm also really happy that I have as much as I have left to go. Because now I get to continue reading with all of this added perspective. That's fantastic. Oh
Yeah.
man.
I mean, the what you want out of a story like this fantastical story, is to
Hmm.
make the metaphorical literal. And
Hmm.
so that it gives people that seed of self-change that they see, oh my God, I have trauma that's similar to Hades, or I have
Hmm.
trauma that's similar to Persephone, or I'm in a very difficult relationship like Hera
Hmm.
is, you see them figure their way out, in addition to dealing with these large themes and psychological archetypes that fulfill things. Many men out there, as you said, probably have a dad that, is scary and large in their psyche, like Kronos to Hades, and
Hmm.
fulfills this like dark father aspect in their psyche. And seeing how Hades's love for Persephone helps him conquer that emotionally is really, really important for people to read. In addition to how the mythic structure itself is a quest for wholeness for all of the characters, which gives us hope that maybe one day we can find wholeness in ourselves.
Man, it's so good. I love how something as simple as a web comic, right? When because when you present that to somebody, it's like, oh, what's Lore Olympus? And it's like, well, it's a web comic, right? But that medium, which can mean a lot of different things. It can mean a like a newspaper strip style web comic. It can mean a longer ongoing epic. Um, it but it can have this ability to transcend what that medium is. I'm so excited. I didn't know that there was an animated series in the works. That's really exciting because to me that's a medium that is definitely, especially right now, I think it's a
Hmm.
very accepted medium. It's got a much wider reach than something like a web comic or even a traditional comic does. Um, so it
And
means
being
that
on
more
Netflix
people are,
means
yeah,
it's got a good chance of being viewed. So,
as long as it doesn't get killed in the first season, before it even airs,
I mean,
that's the
yeah, that's the danger with Netflix
yeah,
right now and kind of
yeah,
all platforms and sort of dismissing animation. My hope is because it's being produced by Jim Henson Animation that it's
yeah,
safe.
yeah,
But yeah, it does. I mean, it does have a chance of not going where we would like it to go, but
sure, absolutely,
it
yeah,
it deserves the love it gets. And it absolutely deserves to have, the story completely
hmm,
told. One of the things I really love about Webtoon, which is originally a Korean company, that published, of course, Korean comics, is that it's the sort of mine or the place where stories get to try out before they end up becoming animations or K
hmm,
dramas. And
hmm,
it has this webtoon to K drama entire pipeline built now. And this is one of the first North American, well, Western, because Rachel's from, I believe, either I apologize, Rachel, if you're listening to this, New Zealand or Australia. I'll have to
okay,
look it up. I'm really sorry. She's from that part of the world. But kind of Western lens that became popular and is now getting sort of promoted into another medium, adapted of, in and of itself into a new medium. And my hope is that we get more of this because there are so many female creators doing webtoons
hmm,
nowadays. And they're an absolute gold mine for getting femme gaze, heroines' journeys,
hmm,
this deep telling of psychological wholeness that we deeply need as a culture.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I just double checked while you were talking. She's from New Zealand.
Oh, okay. I
Yeah, yeah.
apologize.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I mean, like that's yeah. It's look, I we're expected to hold a lot of information in our brains about human beings, and we're only really designed to know about 100 people. So, the fact that we are able to stretch beyond that as modern humans is impressive, anyways. So
And I
that's
have
why
an
we have phones.
entire
That's we
encyclopedia knowledge of mythology and Star Wars in my brain.
yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. Like the same thing, right? I mean, like I know who Koran Horn is, but for some reason I can't remember the name of the guy that works at my ophthalmologist, right? I've interacted with this guy a good couple dozen times. He's very nice. I like him. I get my glasses done there specifically because of this one guy. Can't remember his name. Can't remember his name, but I do know Koran Horn and his entire backstory, as well as all 151 original Pokemon. So like, and those are really useful things for me on a daily basis.
but
But
can
then,
you sing the song?
the poker rap, no, no, I don't quite have that level of recall on that one.
So
But
Michael,
yeah,
I know this is your show, but I'm going to
yeah,
ask you. Do you have any
yeah.
questions for me about Lore Olympus?
Oh man. Okay, so this is tough because I'm only halfway through, kind of, right?
Okay.
I have sort of a whole other half in season 2. From of all of it so far, what god from Greek mythology hasn't shown up yet that you would love to see show up?
Hephaestus. No, sorry,
It-
Hephaestus has shown up. I apologize.
Has it? Okay.
Dionysus.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
Hephaestus was my answer. Like that's
Right.
I'm
Hephaestus is
reading and
in
I'm
there
like,
and he comes and he's amazing. You'll love him.
okay. I,
Yeah.
I messaged you the other day and said that like one of my favorite things, one of my favorite experiences of reading the comic is that like every time a new character gets introduced, I'm like, oh, this is my favorite character now,
Well,
for
Aries,
5 minutes.
Showed up, I lost my, like, I lost it. He
Yeah,
is amazing. And like the
yeah.
relationship Ares and Aphrodite has just fits so perfectly with mythology that I like died. But Dionysus hasn't shown up, and I know Rachel has a plan for him.
Okay.
I'm super invested in Dionysus in general, which I mean, those of you who have played the Hades video game, which is
Hmm.
also exceptional.
Hmm.
I would love I could also do a perfect 10 on Hades.
Yeah,
Um, but Hades the video game, the character that you play is Zagreus, which
yeah.
is another name slash, divergent storytelling for Dionysus, because at one point Dionysus was sort of dark Zeus and Persephone's child. Because at one point there wasn't a separation between Zeus and Hades in
Hmm.
mythology, and there wasn't a separation between Demeter and Persephone.
That's very interesting. That's
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if she will talk about Zagreus or bring Zagreus in
hmm.
as an aspect of Dionysus, or if she's going to go more kind of a newer mythology and have Semele and Zeus be the parents of Dionysus.
Hmm.
It'll be interesting. Dionysus is a great character to bring in. He brings a lot of truth and chaos, as a god, right? And he's not born yet, so I don't think.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that's one of the things that I think is really fun about it is sort of um the dynamics of like of how old everybody is or is not,
Hmm.
and the way that those dynamics can play. You bring up Ares, right? The way that Ares is both the son of Zeus but like kind of a contemporary because Zeus acts very childish. Um, but then also Eros and Ares are like there's the relationship there, but then like they are still contemporaries as well, like and especially like in the way that they interact with Persephone. So it's like even though Persephone's only 19 in this
Yeah,
story, and some of these other characters are 1,000 years old or hundreds of years old. There's I think there's a really great metaphor for arrested development in there, where that like some of these characters, even though they are thousands of years old, still act like children sometimes, right?
hmm
Like they still have these aspects of them. And I think that one of the things that works there is that because they are gods and because the gods are archetypes, that they're not well-rounded characters, right? For
no,
so many of them
and
are not intentionally not well-rounded characters. They're meant to be one note, and so that ends up being when they're in their element, they're competent, or in some cases that competence is played off as like sort of awesome in the capital A awesome sense,
yeah,
to be feared, right? Zeus is that way. When we see him unleashing, he's a very scary character, but then the rest of the time he's a joke, right? And
yeah,
it's that fact that like that's the part of him that is fully developed, but then his maturity is he's got the maturity of a 12-year-old, right?
yeah,
And sort of the restraint of a 12-year-old. And it's and she plays with that aspect of it, like that sort of I think pernicious is probably one of the best words to describe it, that nature of the Greek gods, where it's like they kind of just do as they will, right?
well,
Um,
I mean, I
and
think that comes to the allegory of them representing natural things, right?
mhm, yeah, yeah,
Things that are like Poseidon being the sea, literally allegorically being the sea, you
yeah,
know.
There's a
or otherwise.
Poseidon's a character we have, as far as I've read, we haven't gotten that much of. He's just sort of
No, he's just kind of
he.
in the background with
I
his brothers,
I
right?
do like it when he shows up at one point, and he shows up when Ares shows up, and he shows up late, and everybody
Yeah.
else has sort of done the thing. He shows up late, and they're, "Why are you so late?" And he just holds up the 6 pack of beers.
Yeah.
He's very much of the three of them. He's the comic relief. He's the middle child.
Yeah.
Kind of forgotten. I have 2 brothers, right? I have 2 older brothers, and sometimes I am relating very, very much to Hades in this story, because there's a lot of stuff that I have to do. Even though I'm the youngest, somehow I'm saddled with a lot of the responsibility in the family. And so I see that with him, and like his duty, and the whole aspect of like, is this a choice that you made, or is it a choice that people told you that you made?
Yeah.
I relate very heavily to that, and there's a moment in, like, right after that scene with Ares, where the 3 of them, because Hera tells them to everybody to leave, everybody to get out of there, and they go, the 3 of them, and he's there's a moment where they're like, the 3 of them are all like huddled up, and Zeus and Poseidon are like ready to party and happy, and Hades is just like in this huddle, and he's just like, "I hate you guys." I tweeted it, where I was like, it's just relatable. It's so relatable, because I just like, I'm not the same as my brothers.
Yeah.
They're both jocks. They're both a little bit like they don't take things as personally. They're not as um they're not as passionate in the way that I'm passionate, which tends to work to my detriment more than to my benefit. Like, they don't get invested in things in the same way that I do. And so, like, there's always just this constant conflict there, of like me being like, but this is important and this matters, and then them being like, yeah, but whatever, I don't care. And it's like, I know that you don't care, but I'm trying to tell you right now that I care, right? Why
Yeah.
is no one ever listening to me? And so I'm reading this, and I'm just like, every time that dynamic comes up with the 3 of them, I'm just like, yeah, I feel that deep in my soul. That's one of the places where I think that Rachel, like, she understands something about that male dynamic, but more importantly, Hades and his the fact that Hades doesn't fit into that. Hades is
Mhm.
not like the rest of the male gods, who are very much just about spreading seed, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's a motivating factor in so many of these characters, like, just their psyches, right?
Yeah.
And he's not there, and it's like, and I feel like, as you and I have talked about, like, I am so much more comfortable with women. I At Celebration, I ended up surrounded with all of these women. I and talking about all of this great Star Wars stuff from these different perspectives, that was such a different experience from my past Star Wars celebrations, where I was mostly with men. Um, but I was so much more comfortable this time around. As much as I love all of those, many of those men that I was hanging out with in the past, um, and had a good time in those circles and stuff like that. It always feels like I have to, like, put it on a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
I have to dress up in that costume, so to speak. But yeah, like, the way that she writes Hades, he's very relatable to someone like me, that's a more, the cliche, the more sensitive guy, that's more in touch with that feminine aspect, and that sort of thing, and more seeking that out. And then I see Hades, and like, in the underworld, he is not surrounded by men, right?
Yeah.
Hecate is right there, and then the Furies, and like, and he has this relationship with Hera that is very deep and meaningful to him.
Mhm.
That's maybe more, maybe less, like,
Mm. He really doesn't like to hang out with Thanatos too much.
yeah, he's so put off whenever a guy shows up.
Yeah.
And I just like, it's very interesting to sort of like uncover those things, and see myself through that lens and go like, yep, this character is very much me. The
I
other
think
part
you'll
of
like
it,
Hephaestus.
yeah, okay,
Yeah.
that makes me excited because that is the character, like I said before. It's like that's the one that I'm like, when's Hephaestus gonna show up? Because there's so many interesting things about a
And
blacksmith
and
to
she
the gods,
does
you know.
yeah, she does an amazing job of making him like in how Lore Olympus and the gods' lands are modernized,
Hmm.
making what he does make sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
That's
really
good.
good. You're gonna love
That's
it.
good. Something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Um, I so I obviously Hades is the character that I relate to the most. For you, who do you relate to the most out of all of the characters in the series?
Oh gosh. Uh I don't know that I personally relate to any of them like
Hmm.
on a huge level except for the fact that all of the women are incredibly competent. So,
Yeah,
Persephone in some aspects, Hera in some aspects kind of being like
yeah.
this mom, this really caring mom, as well as Hecate. I love her. I don't know. She's there's this scene really early on in the comic where she blows off giving Persephone a tour of the facilities just so she
Mhm.
can buy a t-shirt. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. And then like she gets interrupted and just gets really mad. It's like, well, yeah, I just wanted to do my one thing. Like I work hard all day long and I just wanted to do this one thing, and then you guys come
yeah,
in with your like drama and your problems. Like, why can't you just solve it yourself? Yeah,
yeah.
she's really, really great, and, yeah, I hope to get more Demeter and to
Mm,
understand more about her, like, in the mythic musical that I mentioned before, I love that version of Demeter. She's totally understandable and, like, lovable as a mom, and her entire like reasons for trying to get Persephone back totally makes sense and
mm,
work. And I don't know that we've gotten that quite yet with Demeter. I hear a lot of people are like very upset with her, but I just don't know that we've actually gotten her perspective. What's really interesting is Rachel is very familiar with the mythology and has read like the Homeric hymns and has read Ovid Ovid's Metamorphosis, and so is really familiar with
mhm.
the texts that talk about Demeter, and so has been very coy about actually having her
Yeah,
in in the comic very much, right? Except for kind of in sort of flashbacks or from
yeah,
a POV of Persephone's perspective. Um, and so I'm looking forward to actually getting more of her actually out there in and seeing what she's like.
yeah. Yeah, there is an aspect of it, certainly where I'm at in the story of her being this unseen force, and just sort of, uh, I mean, we do get flashbacks and that sort of thing, but in the present tense, she is very much just this thing that Persephone is not ready to deal with. So I'm sure that when the story gets there, when Persephone is ready to deal with Demeter, then we'll get more of that. I love the way that it plays with the time,
Yeah.
and like we'll switch back and forth between present day and, or I mean, for them, their present tense
Yeah.
and the past, um, and even also because of the nature of it being Greek myth, a little bit of the future every now and then. Like when we visit the fates,
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
we just get these snippets. We just get these snippets because the sort of the beauty in retelling a story that already exists is in both subverting expectation, but then also meeting expectation or exceeding, right?
Yeah.
um and so
Recontextualizing is
yeah,
really, really important too, right? So
yeah.
like you know and one of the examples that I have is Psyche and Eros, right? Like
Mm,
we have this very long standing mythology, and archetypically it's, maybe the first Beauty and the Beast, and it's probably where Beauty and the Beast comes from.
Hmm.
And how do you make that something that is contextualized, where it's not basically he just stole her away from her family, and
Yeah.
then kind of forced her to go on a ton of trials? And how do you make it like relevant to,
Yeah.
emotionality and what he went through? And I'm so happy that they're telling that as part of the story,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
they've spent enough time like telling that story to feel like that's interesting, and it's peppered throughout, which is also great.
Yeah. Especially with where Eros has been placed in relation to Persephone's story, right? Like
Yeah.
as a character that she confides in,
Yeah.
and who is this sounding board for her. But then he has his own messy backstory. He has his own messy
Yeah.
history, but it can't be too messy because we still need him to be someone that we trust, right? It's
Yeah.
there's a lot to balance there for sure. This has been such an awesome conversation, and I fear that we could go on forever and ever and ever. So I think it's good. We can wrap it here for now. But I want to say that this is like an ellipsis when I when the animated stuff is coming out. Maybe we'll come back and we'll revisit and talk a little bit more about because I'm almost done season one. That's where like that's sort of how it's
Hmm.
broken up in Webtoon. So I'm almost done season one. And the next time that we come back and talk about this, maybe we can talk about season two a little bit more and get into that. And hopefully by then, everybody who's listened to this will also have jumped on board and gotten in before all of the mainstream normies find out about how great this story is when it hits Netflix, right? And then you guys can all say that you were there before it was cool,
Like a bunch of
and
hipsters. Yep.
yeah, like a bunch of hipsters, and you can point back to Perfect 10 for the reason why. I Marie-Claire, this has been so great. This is exactly what I wanted. It's
Oh,
it, it
I'm glad to meet expectations.
Yeah. Oh, exceed expectations. Exceeded expectations for sure. Um, the fantastic thing about this is that you and I had this conversation. The next episode of Perfect 10 is going to be a conversation with Ty, and
Oh.
we're going to be talking about A Knight's Tale. So that's what I have
Oh,
next on the schedule.
wow.
Yeah,
That's
and
great.
I'm super excited for that one too.
You
Yeah,
Okay, can I
this
make a
podcast is just an
recommendation?
excuse. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Watch A Knight's Tale with
Yeah.
the cast commentary on.
Okay. I will. You know what? I'll do that because I've watched it so many times. I don't need to just watch it again, but I will watch it with the cast commentary for sure
Paul
because I
Bettany
haven't
is
done
a
that before.
gem.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. This podcast is just an excuse for me to grab my favorite people from the internet and make them talk about the things that they love, so that we can just share. We can just share in the love of these things.
It's great.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. Let everybody know where they can find you and all of your great content.
Oh my goodness. Well, I have been Marie-Claire Gould, and I run a podcast that talks primarily about Star Wars and mythology, and sort of the, in a lot of ways, why Star Wars works, called What the Force. And I also have another podcast called What the Fiction, which I sometimes do videos associated with on YouTube, which I talk about everything else I want to talk about. And again, I will be talking about Lore Olympus when the show comes out. So come back and catch me then.
Fantastic. Yeah. I mean, anybody who's listened to me for the last 2 years is probably just sick of me recommending, but I can't recommend enough. What the Force as a podcast, like it completely changed my perspective on Star Wars. And I opened my eyes to so many aspects of it, of the mythology that I was missing out on. But it also then opened up so many other things in other stories, and also your conversations about Marvel stuff on What the Fiction. likewise.
Oh
So
yeah, I did do that for a while.
yeah. So I mean, I can't recommend What the Force enough. I would say also go to Patreon and support over there and get it early. While you're over there, you can also support ThunderQuack, and get this podcast early and other bonuses and such. But you guys will hear all about that in the rigmarole. I will be back. Actually, this week you'll also, if you're a supporter at the $5 level or above, you'll also get an episode of Off the Record, which I'll record later tonight, to put out alongside this one. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but I don't know. That's usually how it is. I figure it out on the day. I I hit record and then I talk. But the next episode after that will be Force Perspectives with Curtis Finley, which Curtis and I have done a lot of podcasting together, but we have not talked about Star Wars that much. And it was very structured because we were talking about the comic books. So he'll be on Force Perspectives to talk about his favorite aspect of Star Wars. And I'm very curious to find out what that's going to be, because it's not a conversation. He and I talk about a lot of stuff, but we don't really talk about Star Wars that much. So it's going to be new to me as well. So I'm excited for that one. That should be out in a couple weeks. And then after that, like I said, we've got Ty coming on to talk about A Knight's Tale in October. So thank you everybody for listening. Thank you, Marie-Claire, for coming on the podcast. And I will catch you on the next one. ThunderQuack Perfect 10 is hosted by me, Michael Cohn. Follow us on Twitter at ThunderQuackPod, on Instagram at ThunderQuackPodcast, on Facebook at ThunderQuack, and join us on Discord at thunderquack.com/Discord. Support the podcast by heading to patreon.com/ThunderQuack to get early access, bonus episodes, and the ThunderQuack Perfect 10 Pop Quiz. ThunderQuack Perfect 10 is part of the ThunderQuack Podcast Network. Thanks for listening.